Chapter 5. Life is a playground. Of all animal species, humans are the biggest players of all. We are built to play and built through play. When we play, we are engaged in the purest expression of our humanity, the truest expression of our individuality. Is it any wonder that often the times we feel most alive, those that make up our best memories, are moments of play? Stuart Brown, Stay Playful Oreo commercial tagline. It is not only possible to say a great deal in praise of play, it is really possible to say the highest things in praise of it. It might reasonably be maintained that the true object of all human life is play. G.K. Chesterton. People often ask me why I always seem happy and good-natured. In part, this is my disposition. However, I also tackle life in a way that allows me to maximize the hedonic benefits of every situation. If we go on a vacation, within the first 3 days, every single person in our hotel has already shared with me their deepest secrets. Because I listen, because I care, because I take an interest, because I can be playful even as I tackle deeply serious issues. I can be funny when critiquing idea pathogens, at the root of the mental illness of political correctness and wokeness. I can have fun when conducting a research study. I play with my children. I play with my wife. Hence, it is a way of living life that is rooted in play. The Strong Museum, National Museum of Play, has cult quotes about play stemming from some of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. Here are a few wonderful examples. Almost all creativity involves purposeful play. Abraham Maslow, humanist psychologist. If you want to be creative, stay in part a child. With the creativity and invention that characterizes children before they are deformed by adult society. Jean Piaget, developmental psychologist. Play is hard to maintain as you get older. You get less playful. You shouldn't, of course. Richard Feynman, physicist and Nobel laureate. There are countless other leading thinkers who have weighed in on the importance of play, including the psychoanalyst Carl Jung. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity, and the developmental psychologist David Elkind. Combining ideas from Sigmund Freud and Jean Piaget, the author views play as one of 3 necessary elements of a full life, the others being work and love. The 1988 movie Big, starring Tom Hanks, is a heartwarming and lovely film. I first watched it as a young man, when it was originally released, and again more recently, when I introduced it to my children. It is part of a genre of body swap movies, where a person is transformed into another version of himself, like 17 Again, starring Zac Efron and Matthew Perry, or when 2 individuals switch bodies, as in The Change-Up, starring Ryan Reynolds and Jason Bateman. In Big, a young boy, Josh, makes a wish to be a grown-up in front of a Zoltar machine, often seen at fairs and amusement parks. His wish is granted, and he metamorphosizes into an adult. In his new grown-up body, the transformed kid heads off to New York City seeking a job, and lands one at a toy company. While Josh has the body of an adult, his mind and behavioral patterns are those of a 12-year-old boy. Josh accepts a day-to-entry job at the toy company, but is quickly noticed by the owner of the firm, played by Robert Loggia, precisely because of Josh's apparent youthful exuberance and quirky ways. Unlike the stuffy MBA types, Josh is spontaneous and free. During a company meeting to discuss various toy prototypes, Josh distinguishes himself from the conventional MBA type analyzes with his childlike enthusiasm. His peculiar attitude and behaviors even attract the romantic interests of an otherwise uptight female co-worker, played by Elizabeth Perkins. His playfulness is refreshingly unique, precisely because it is so rare to see in an adult. The idea that the workplace should be construed as a playground to unlock one's creative juices has received increased attention in the academic literature. Henry Ford was perfectly incorrect when he famously stated, "When we are at work, we ought to be at work. When we are at play, we ought to be at play. There is no use trying to mix the two. The sole object ought to be to get the work done and to get paid for it. When the work is done, then the play can come, but not before." Evolutionary roots of play. Evolutionary psychology distinguishes between 2 levels of scientific explanations, proximate and ultimate. Much of science operates within the proximate realm, which deals with an elucidation of the how and what of a phenomenon. How does diabetes work? What are the factors that augment your chances of being diagnosed with diabetes? Ultimate explanations, on the other hand, refer to the Darwinian why of a phenomenon. Hence, evolutionary theory augments the explanatory power of proximate scientific conclusions by adding ultimate ones that allow us to fully understand anything involving biological beings. An example that I often like to use to explain this distinction is pregnancy sickness. There are innumerable proximate explanations that one might explore when studying this phenomenon. One might investigate how hormone levels are associated with the symptoms, or how to relieve the severity of the symptoms, and so on. Of equal importance, though, is to consider why this condition exists. That is, why did it evolve in human beings? It turns out that it is an adaptive mechanism that has evolved to protect the fetus from exposure to teratogens, food-borne pathogens, during the crucial period of organogenesis. Hence, the attractions to foods like pickles or repulsions to foods like eggs that pregnant women experience are adaptive strategies for protecting the fetus from foods that are more likely to carry foodborne pathogens. Women who experience greater pregnancy sickness during the first trimester often have better outcomes on measures of a successful pregnancy, including a lesser likelihood of having a miscarriage. Thus, from an evolutionary perspective, when a pregnant woman's gynecologist provides her with a treatment to shut off her pregnancy sickness, this is the perfectly incorrect thing to do. If we apply evolutionary theory to the study of play, what do we find? Many people intuitively construe play as a product of childhood, a form of useless and purposeless frolicking that we eventually outgrow as we enter adulthood. In other words, in the same way that our appendix or our wisdom teeth have been construed as vestigial, it is assumed they no longer confer an evolutionary function. Is play a vestigial pattern of behaviors? Hardly. The reality is that play is an integral element of our human nature. Play has evolved precisely because it has conferred an adaptive advantage, and that continues to be the case. Peter Gray is a psychologist who specializes in applying evolutionary theory to the study of play. In a recent summary article, he posits that play has evolved to achieve one of 4 functions. Play teaches 1. Skills and behaviors that are germane for survival and mating. Play fighting, engaging in predator-prey chasing. 2. How to respond appropriately to uncertain negative events, building emotional and physical resilience. 3. Creativity, which can include problem-solving and innovation. 4. And friendly cooperation, a central feature of human sociality. Play is found in all human societies and across many mammalian species. The play instinct is so powerful that even during wartime, children find a way to play. During the Lebanese Civil War, 2 of the many ways to die were at the hands of the ubiquitous, indiscriminate snipers and via the relentless shelling. We quickly learned from the whistle signature of the incoming bombs, which were the most or least dangerous. I recall being told to play in a particular area, but not to stray. Otherwise, I would be in the sniper's visual field. I also remember on one occasion going out to play with my then closest friend, my second cousin, and accidentally, but severely cutting the middle finger on my left hand with a pocket knife I had brought for protection. I still bear the scar today. My memories include those of war, but also those of play that helped me escape the war's daily horrors. I fully understand the reaction of 2 young boys from Damascus who responded to their experiences in the Syrian civil war by saying, "We want to play every day. We love to play in the neighborhood. We don't play anymore because of snipers and shelling in our neighborhood." I lived a similar experience. Plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. As a side note, my second cousin, with whom I used to play amidst the brutality of war, was horrified by my favorable disposition toward Tucker Carlson. I had posted a photo of Tucker and me after having taped a conversation on his podcast. My caption was, "What a fantastic conversation with the immeasurably charming at Tucker Carlson. Thank you." I didn't know my cousin monitored my Twitter account, but he replied, "Really shame on you. How low can you go? Here is a life lesson regarding the good life. Don't be my cousin." Our shared childhood experiences did not instill within him broad sympathies or tolerance and understanding or deepened friendship. Instead, he remained the same narrow-minded and judgmental person I remembered. My cousin's action proves that personality traits are rather stable throughout one's lifetime. The urge to play can be found in numerous contexts that might otherwise seem grim. Patch Adams is a physician who has spent 5 decades promoting the healing power of laughter. His medical school training was 1998 movie Patch Adams, starring Robin Williams. 2 exchanges capture the tension of using play and laughter in the medical context. The first between Adams and the dean of the medical school, Dean Walcott, played by Bob Gunton, and the second between Adams and one of his classmates, Mitch Roman, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. Dean Walcott: "Do you want to tell me what it is you think you're doing?" Patch is clowning around in a patient's room. Patch: Just getting a few laughs, sir." The American Journal of Medicine has found that laughter increases secretion of catecholamines and endorphins, which in turn increases oxygenation of the blood, relaxes the arteries, speeds up the heart, decreases blood pressure, which has a positive effect on all cardiovascular and respiratory ailments, as well as overall increasing the immune system response. And now, the exchange between Patch and Roman. Patch, if you don't like me, just say it. Mitch: Roman, I don't like you. Patch: why don't you like me? You're a prick and I like you, Mitch, because you make my effort a joke. I want to be a doctor. This isn't a game to me. This isn't playtime. This is serious business. But all serious business, all parts of life, can be made better by certain aspects of play. Perhaps nothing is as serious a topic as the Holocaust, which led to the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews, among countless other innocent victims. And yet, the 1997 movie, Life is Beautiful, sought to strike a delicate balance in demonstrating that even within the horrors of this gargantuan tragedy, a father's love might take the form of play to distract his son from the terrible realities around them. Of note, the historian George Eisen wrote a book about how children engaged in play behavior in the extermination camps. Play is such a fundamental feature of the human spirit that it is used as a tool in psychotherapy, an area that typically involves an exploration of the roots of mental suffering. Hence, even in the darkest of circumstances, the desire to play manifests itself. Developmental psychologists and pediatricians have long demonstrated the benefits reaped when children play. Not only is play a fundamental feature of a child's healthy physical and psychological development, lack of play is often associated with a state of reduced physical and psychological health. In other words, play is both an antecedent to good health. We play more when we are in a positive state, and an outcome of good health. We feel better when we play. But of course, play should not be an activity restricted to children. Individuals who score higher on an adult playfulness scale exhibit greater psychological and physical well-being on a broad range of variables, and they also possess greater life satisfaction. In other words, a playful mindset into adulthood protects our bodies and minds in a myriad of ways, and gives us a more positive outlook regarding our lives. In a study of the 24 character strengths that are best correlated with life satisfaction, hope, zest, gratitude, curiosity, and love came out on top. Note that curiosity and zest are both linked to a playful mindset. When the humanist psychologist Abraham Maslow proposed his hierarchy of needs, he put self-actualization at the apex. Some elements of self-actualization serve as ultimate forms of play, such as when we actively seek to explore new landscapes, interests, and activities for the sheer pleasure of doing so, enrolling in a cooking course, taking up crossword puzzles as a hobby, or traveling to an exotic location. The path to happiness is paved through the magic of play. On the importance of laughter, Dave Chappelle is one of the most successful comedians of all time. He does not succumb to the soft bigotry of low expectations, as coined by Michael Gerson, George W. Bush's speechwriter. He does not put on kid gloves when writing jokes about particular groups. He is an equal opportunity offender in that he will make fun of the LGBTQ activists, blacks, whites, Jews, Asians, and, most tellingly, himself. And yet, in today's grand game of victimology poker, it is simply unacceptable to make fun of some groups because they are allegedly marginalized, when in fact, many of them are endlessly celebrated by the media and the institutions of the liberal West. As I explained in my book The Parasitic Mind, ideas that cannot be mocked cannot be true. Truth is anti-fragile. It is not brittle. It does not shatter into a million pieces because of an offensive and hurtful joke. An individual with a strong personhood can laugh at others in a playful manner and laugh at himself. Humor is a test of anti-fragility and non-brittleness in a person and in a society. A society that can't laugh at others and at itself in a good-humored way is on its way out. If you can laugh at yourself, as I often do, this is the ultimate symbol of your confidence. Self-deprecating humor is thus what we would call a costly signal made it appears at the expense of one's self-esteem. Not surprisingly, historically speaking, dictators have always despised the use of humor, precisely because they recognize that their hold over people is ultimately fragile, based on force and lies, and humor undermines their rule. In fall 2021, I hosted the journalist and attorney Megyn Kelly on my show. While introducing her, I admitted to being a big fan of hers, to which she replied as follows, slightly edited for expository clarity. I'll return the compliment. Last night at our house, we had over 2 very powerful law enforcement types, and we, Doug, Megan's husband, and I, were imitating different sad acts. You know how you do your funny bits. We each had our favorite. I was doing mine, he was doing his. And so you have 2 new big fans. One is a CIA guy, and one is a cop guy. On my show, I have several lines of satirical sketches that are meant to mock various elements of the current zeitgeist. For example, I have a series of satirical clips that utilize the Aslan Uger Decoder 5000, named after Reza Aslan and Cenk Uger, two hopelessly lobotomized progressives. The prop in question is a toy phone, which I use to decode various progressive nonsense. I have also posted many self-flagellation clips, wherein I utilize 3 types of whips of self-loathing: a belt, a swatter, and a flogger sent to me by a fan. I will literally whip myself on camera while satirically apologizing for past transgressions, such as having been friends with Jordan Peterson. My hiding under the desk series has also become a global favorite. Each episode involves my speaking to the camera whilst feigning excessive fear, and literally hiding under my study's desk. The inaugural episode was a satirical take on the hysterical faux fear that all progressives were expressing at the inauguration of Donald Trump. Other persons or things that have since sent me into hiding include the successful podcaster Joe Rogan, the Freedom Convoy in Canada, voter ID laws, the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse, the pronoun Taliban, the January 6th insurrectionists, Donald Trump's impeachment acquittals, the appointments of Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court, Jussie Smollett, Brexit, and climate change. I have also satirized Elizabeth Warren's slice of life interaction with her husband in her kitchen, the cackling of Kamala Harris, the bizarre interaction of Kamala Harris with several child actors in promoting space research, Hillary Clinton having raped me, Jussie Smollett and his friends having attacked me in a hate crime, and Ketanji Brown Jackson having assaulted me at Camp B'nai B'rith, possibly in 1977. It takes sizable self-confidence to produce such content, precisely because most professors are severely constrained by their stiffness. They wrongly presume that to be a serious professor requires that they present themselves to the world in all circumstances in a solemn manner. Hogwash. I can publish a very rigorous scientific paper in a leading academic journal, author a best-selling book, accept speaking engagements at leading universities, and be funny, playful, and dear Reverend. In February 2022, I spoke at a national event organized by Hillsdale College. The next day, Larry Arnn, the president of this wonderful anti-woke institution, ran into me at breakfast. After complimenting my work, he added, "And you're a hoot. My life is greatly enriched by having a playful and humorous personality. It does not diminish the seriousness of the issues that I tackle. Rather, it offers some much-needed levity from the doom and gloom inherent to some of the topics that I address. My ability to be playful serves as a pressure relief valve from the otherwise unbearable, ugly realities that I deal with on a daily basis. It is part of the homeostatic mechanism for retaining my sanity." Researchers have argued for the evolutionary roots of laughter and humor. www.larryweaver.com. They've done so using several disciplines, including cognitive neuroscience, primatology, developmental psychology, positive psychology, and play research. The reality is that laughter and humor constitute indelible elements of our human nature, and not surprisingly, laughter yields many mental and physical health benefits. In one recent study in Norway, with more than 53,000 participants, humor, the cognitive component, was protective against specific forms of mortality in men, infections, and women, cardiovascular diseases, and infections. The old adage, laughter is the best medicine, appears to be empirically true. Playing outside, biophilia, and well-being. My wife and I are only too familiar with the addictive nature of electronics. We get iPads or iPhones. It has proven nearly impossible to modulate the amount of time that our children spend on these devices. The ill consequences on one's health and well-being with increased usage of these devices is unequivocal. With increased usage comes a greater likelihood for obesity and depressive symptoms, poorer dietary choices, decreased quality of life, greater anxiety, decreased metabolic and cardiovascular health, worsened psychosocial health, reduced cognitive development and educational achievement, and worsening sleep patterns, among other negative consequences. Instead of being stuck interacting with electronics, children benefit greatly from interacting with the natural world. The lack of time that children now spend outdoors, immersed in the restorative benefits of nature, was coined nature deficit disorder by best-selling author Richard Louv. While an obsession with electronics is a tragic reality for many children, the ill effects apply to adults as well. I have experienced firsthand the negative consequences of being endlessly accessible online. I'm more stressed out, more agitated, and more short-tempered. Whenever I take an enforced break from social media, I see an immediate improvement in my general well-being. Children and adults alike reap great psychological and physical benefits from playing outside. The forms of play might vary depending on your age, but the need to engage in green play is universally beneficial, whether you are 7 or 77 years old. The lockdowns associated with the COVID pandemic have been disastrous on many levels. To be stuck indoors, isolated from others for long time periods is a tough reality to bear. Fortunately for my family, our backyard proved to be an oasis that has offered us an inoculation against pandemic-related cabin fever. I suspect that urban apartment dwellers who did not have daily access to a green space had more difficulty coping with the lockdowns because there is plenty of research that supports the importance of interacting with nature. The evolutionary biologist E.O. Wilson coined this term, biophilia, recognizing the innate need humans have to interact with nature. Such interactions have clear positive consequences on one's mental and physical health. Biophilic architecture recognizes this basal human need by creating living spaces that are congruent with it. For example, post-surgery patients placed in rooms with views of nature do far better than those placed in rooms facing a brick wall. Those with a window to nature had shorter stays in the hospital, fewer negative comments from attending nurses, were administered fewer analgesics, and experienced fewer post-surgical complications. The restorative effects of having access to a window to nature are not restricted to hospital settings. Employees in offices with views of a forest have greater job satisfaction and less job stress than those who don't. Over the past year or so, a friend and I have instituted walk and talk sessions. He is a clinical psychologist and colleague who shares many of my broad intellectual interests, and hence our conversations are always fun, intense, and engaging. Rather than simply meeting at a cafe to catch up with one another, we go on long walks and use the opportunity to engage in a free-flowing exchange of ideas, a form of intellectual play. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously opined that only thoughts that come by walking have any value. While this might be an overstatement on his part, it is incontestably true that to be in movement can trigger one's intellectual juices. It is perhaps not surprising to know that two of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, the physicist Albert Einstein and the mathematician Kurt Gödel, took long walks when they worked at Princeton University's Institute for Advanced Study. Think when in doubt, go for a walk. Science is play. Close to a decade ago, I was approached by a Canadian rapper named Baba Brinkman, who asked me to appear in a rap video titled, "I'm a African." Brinkman uses rap music to inspire young children about the beauty of science in general, and evolution in particular. I was more than happy to oblige, and in the true spirit of play, I put out a call on social media asking people to suggest a stage name for my new career as a rap star. Although I received many worthy suggestions, none seemed to stick. One day I mentioned this to the owner of a local cafe. He looked at me and said, "Oh, that's easy. You're the Gadfather." Bingo. The moniker has so taken off that I now often receive professional letters with the salutation, "Dear Gadfather." This nickname stems from a desire to have fun and play. Other professors would never dare take this step of adopting a playful stage name because it is a testament of humility. As Joe Rogan kindly remarked on one of my appearances on his show, I can be a very serious professor whilst not always taking myself too seriously. Many people have mental images of what different professionals should look like. Accountants, for example, should be button-down bean counters with glasses. Interior designers should be flamboyant. And professors should be serious, measured, and sullen, because these qualities give an aura of profundity. Nonsense. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, was known to be a partier who had an exuberance for life. He partied hard and worked hard. The desire to play need not be a separate realm from the austere pursuit of science. On the contrary, science is the epitome of intellectual play. It requires many of the same elements of play, namely imagination, curiosity, and creativity. People purchase elaborate 1-0-piece puzzles as a form of play. They pay money to be locked up in a room from which they must escape using clues available in that room, known as an escape room. They go on treasure or scavenger hunts, where they must interpret the meaning of various clues in order to collect a set list of items. Each of these forms of play contains many of the same elements found in scientific pursuits, including identifying patterns or clues that permit for a solution to be found. Several years ago, as the COVID pandemic was about to be unleashed globally, my daughter was embarking on her 5th grade science project. She decided to explore whether two odorless and tasteless food colorants, red and blue, placed in a clear soda drink would alter people's perceptions of the drink on 3 key metrics: sweetness, refreshment, and flavor. The entire family used this as a wonderful opportunity to engage in intellectual play. First, we had to purchase the relevant colorants, soda drink, and cups. We also had to develop and print out the questionnaire. Finally, we had to find a venue to set up our drink stand for the experiment. We ended up using the indoor dome at my university, where we intercepted people and encouraged them to take part in the experiment. 29 participants tasted each of the 2 drinks and rated them. Later that day, my daughter and I excitedly tabulated the results in an Excel spreadsheet. Upon going through these various steps, my daughter, in an ebullient and effusive gasp of excitement, advised me that this was so much fun. I told her that this was what I did for a living. I could see in her eyes that I had inspired her. This personal anecdote reminds me of Emily Rosa, who likely remains the youngest person to have ever published a paper in a peer-reviewed medical journal, let alone one as prestigious as the Journal of the American Medical Association. For her grade 4 science project, she designed an experiment to test the validity of therapeutic touch, a new age form of medical quackery based on the idea that human energy fields can cure disease. Not surprisingly, practitioners of this therapy were shown to possess a less than random chance at being able to detect such fields. This is the beauty of the scientific method. It is democratic in that there are no institutional barriers to entry. If a 9-year-old child is able to identify a worthy research question, apply the scientific method, and arrive at valid conclusions, she is just as worthy to publish a scientific paper as anyone else. At the 2014 Annual Society for Consumer Psychology Conference, consumer researcher Darren Dahl, who has been a guest on my show, delivered a presidential address on the importance of play as an integral part of the research process. The talk greatly resonated with me because I have always tried to impart to my students that the pursuit of science is a form of intellectual play. Dahl concluded his talk by saying, "We all want to publish lots of papers. We all want to do great things. But don't get so caught up in that end goal that you lose the process. Because in my mind, discovery, creativity, and play will make you happier and hopefully will help you produce better work." Several scholars have made this exact point, namely, that scientific research is a form of play. Play in scientific research is seldom discussed in print. Perhaps we scientists take it for granted. Or maybe we are a little self-conscious and try to hide it from others. After all, we don't want taxpayers to think they are subsidizing adults who are acting like a bunch of kids, thereby squandering hefty amounts of public money. When we set up encounters between various chemicals, our expectations extend those of the child who has been given a paint box and tries mixing various colors just to see what comes out. In the same mood, the chemist asks himself what would happen were he to change the proportions or modify the sequence of the operations in a complex synthesis. Such a playful, childlike attitude can be extremely fruitful. Let us not be too embarrassed to acknowledge that play is often what motivates us. Real science has the potential to not only amaze, but also transform the way one thinks of the world and oneself. This is because the process of science is little different from the deeply resonant natural processes of play. Play enables humans and other mammals to discover and create relationships and patterns. When one adds rules to play, a game is created. This is science, the process of playing with rules that enables one to reveal previously unseen patterns of relationships that extend our collective understanding of nature. Science, like religion, is a form of sacred play. It creates a world that transcends the world of our senses, a world of make-believe that we may enter if we choose to play. Like all play, it offers a confrontation with important truths about ourselves and the world beyond us. It is widely held that the objectivity of the language of scientific communication has served science well. It is less clear that it has served to open the game of science to the broader society of which the scientific community is a part. Possibly ways could be found to play science as a more public game, in which the purely intellectual play that characterizes science at its best is more visible and readily accessible. The reality is that most academics play the publication game, publish or perish, and in so doing, they lose the creativity and spontaneity of engaging in intellectual play. They become constrained by a rigid reward structure. I believe that scientists and other academics should ignore the careerist considerations of publish or perish, and instead become more intellectually inquisitive, a form of mental play that in the long term will make them better scientists and scholars. The Dutch historian Johan Huizinga referred to human beings as homo ludens, man the player. Well, there is no higher form of play than the discovery of new knowledge using an ethos of childlike wonder. In my nearly 30-year career as a professor, I have had countless opportunities to evaluate scientific projects whilst wearing numerous hats. Be it as a grant reviewer, a reviewer for many leading academic journals, a supervisor, or a researcher, perhaps the leading weakness of most academic research is that it is profoundly uninteresting. Granted, this might be a somewhat subjective judgment, but are there universal markers of interestingness that one might use? In a classic paper published in 1971, the sociologist Murray S. Davis offered a set of 12 criteria that might adjudicate between interesting and non-interesting research, and called for the development of a new field, which he called the sociology of the interesting. In general, his criteria correspond to counterintuitive and surprising features of a finding. For instance, that variable A was thought to cause variable B, but in reality it turns out to be the opposite. Many forms of play have a similar bottom-up emergent feature where the trajectory of the play session unfolds in unexpected ways, as occurs, say, in a comedy improvisation theater. Ultimately, the scientific enterprise is nothing short of a form of cerebral adult play governed by a singular governing rule, the strict and unbiased adherence to the scientific method. Find a life partner with whom to play and laugh. Many years ago, one of my cousins was engaged to a woman who seemed, on paper, to be an ideal prospective wife. All was progressing nicely toward an eventual marriage, until they went away on a beach vacation. It turned out that the feeling of sand on her toes. This proved an impediment to their beach vacation, and ultimately was one of several reasons why they split up. My family is from Lebanon. We live and play at the beach. It is no surprise that Southern California is my second home. If I have to face a Sophie's choice between the beach and my capacity to play there, and a prospective wife who hates the beach, the latter better be as intelligent as two-time Nobel laureate Marie Curie, and as beautiful as the actress Blake Lively. Otherwise, it's beach time. Earlier, I discussed the importance of assortative human mating, namely the idea that birds of a feather flock together when it comes to a broad range of attributes. Does this apply to adult playfulness? Are people who score similarly on such a disposition more likely to be attracted to one another? Intuitively speaking, this would make perfect sense, in that it is difficult to imagine a long-lasting marriage wherein one spouse is sullen and humorless, whilst the other is playful and hilarious. Not surprisingly, individuals who are humorous, fun-loving, and playful tend to be attracted to those who exhibit a similar sunny mindset on life. Of the many reasons that my wife and I have a successful marriage, one is our ability to have fun with one another, to play with one another and to make fun of ourselves and each other in a loving manner. I have often shared some of the funny quips between us on social media. Here is an example from Twitter. Me to my wife. Come see this gorgeous body. Look at it. If I lose another 10 pounds, I'll be impossible to live with. Wife to me. I'm starting a please help me page. My husband's ego is too large for this house now that he is thin. Life is a playground. See my next book. In a cross-cultural study involving 5 countries, China, Russia, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the United States, marital satisfaction humorousness. A meta-analysis showed that humor shared by spouses, relational humor, had a greater positive effect on marital satisfaction than humor that expressed itself in other ways. Couples who laugh together are more likely to have successful unions. This makes perfect evolutionary sense in that humor is a sexually selected trait that serves as a proxy measure for such desirable qualities as intelligence or extroversion. The ability to foster a fun and playful family environment will also help to bring out these qualities in one's children. I have seen this with my own children, who are becoming ever more adept at satire and commenting about serious issues with complete playfulness. Having a playful mindset can help parents bond with their children, and I have created numerous play-related creative pursuits, all of which serve to strengthen our familial bonds. One such game is a photography competition, in which all of the family members have to take a photo of anything that they can find in the house as their official contest submission. We then send the photos to my in-laws, who judge the winning photo without knowing the identity of each photographer. A second game, which I have played with my daughter, is one I call rapid-fire poetry. One of us suggests a word, say, brain, and then we have 20 minutes to generate a poem about it, using the following rules. The poem must consist of 3 verses, 4 lines per verse, and up to 7 words per sentence. Through various creative games, I have been able to carve out quality family time via the magic of play. When the Mossad calls play, I'm about to recount a deeply personal story that I did not share with anyone for more than 2 decades after the events had taken place, and I have only told it to a few individuals since, including my wife, but never in a public forum. So, here we go. Let us hope that the unofficial statute of limitations on the story's confidentiality has passed, as the parties in question are not folks that you would want to upset. Back in the early 1980s, when I was in my late teens, I was approached by a relative who wanted me to meet a male friend of hers. I agreed to the meeting with some trepidation. It seemed an odd request, and my interest was soon piqued even further. The friend told me some Israeli men wanted to meet me, possibly to work on projects of theirs. I met the men, and they told me they worked for Israeli security. They wanted me to help them test possible weaknesses in their security operations. I was all in. I was going to be James Bond in real life. For my first mission, they wanted me to visit an El Al travel bureau in downtown Montreal. I was to enter the office, sit in the waiting room, leave a bag under one of the chairs, ask a question at the reception desk, and then leave without taking the bag. I headed off to the El Al offices, followed my instructions, and the office security forces, unaware that they were being tested, immediately took steps to ensure that the bag I had left behind wasn't a bomb. They passed the test easily. A few weeks later, I was given another, more challenging assignment. I was to enter the Israeli consulate with a fake gun hidden in my winter gloves. The cover story was that I was a university student studying political science who wanted to interview the Israeli consul for a paper I was writing. The script for this operation was elaborate because the security procedures were tighter, and I had to know how to act at each step of the way. At the final layer of security, there would be a more invasive check of my person to establish that I was not carrying any weapons. As you might imagine, I was very concerned that the Israeli agents would discover the gun and harm me, if not kill me. I was assured that my handlers would be there, monitoring the situation, and would intervene before anything grave happened. Not very comforting, but I decided to accept the mission. On that fateful day, I arrived at the consulate and passed through the initial security layers, until I arrived at a room where I was alone with a security agent who patted me down. I could feel my heart racing, but I remained cool. He made his way to my winter gloves, and just as he realized what I was hiding, a shout came from my handlers, who were hidden nearby, advising the security agent that this was a test. Several weeks later, I was approached for a third mission, to test El Al's security readiness at the airport. Specific details withheld. I had truly graduated to becoming an international man of mystery, and it was exhilarating that no one, not even my parents, knew what I was up to. But then, someone, I suppose my relative, spilled the beans to my mother, and she went absolutely hysterical. Apparently, the Mossad, or perhaps Shin Bet, does not wish to mess with an angry Lebanese Jewish mother. My mother made me swear on everything under the sun that I would never accept another mission from the men in question, which I honored, and they never reached out to me again. Later that summer, I was traveling to Israel for the first time to spend several months with my extended family, many of whom I had never met. As I made my way to the LLQ, who do I see coming towards me but one of the secretive security men? He was an older gentleman, the leader of the group that had employed me. We looked at one another. He nodded, I reciprocated the nod, and he disappeared into the crowd. For me, as serious as the security tests were, this was all about play. I was playing a role, and the incidents remain vividly entrenched in my memory as an amazing example. Thanks for watching. Of Life as a Playground. Get a dog. As far back as I can remember, I have always been in love with Belgian Shepherds. I was never able to convince my parents to let me have one, so I made getting one a top item on my to-do list when I'd be on my own. But when I was a graduate student at Cornell University, I thought I was too busy with my studies to bring a dog into my life. Similarly, when I became a young assistant professor, I was too busy establishing my academic career to get a dog. And then I met my wife. I had just gotten tenure, I lived in a beautiful apartment, and the stars seemed finally aligned. But I still somehow felt that acquiring one of these beautiful creatures was an unattainable dream. A few months into our union, I confessed to my wife my obsessive love for these dogs. She listened, and then said, well, let's get one. Wait, what? It's that simple. I had placed countless imaginary obstacles in my mind for no apparent reason. As a young adult, I had attended numerous dog shows just to hang out with the Belgian Shepherd breeders. In the process, I had befriended one in particular. I contacted him, and he told me that while he had an available litter, he very much doubted I would ever acquire a dog. I proved him wrong. Our first Belgian was named Amr, which means moon in Arabic. It is also used as an adjective for great beauty. Several years later, we added a second Belgian named Samra, means dark one in Arabic. It is difficult to express the joy that these two beautiful beings brought to our lives. Our human children grew up knowing no other reality than being protected by two majestic domestic wolves. Dogs are true marvels of nature. They possess many noble qualities that most people aspire to exhibit, and few of our faults. They serve as companions. They protect us. They find us under collapsed buildings and rescue us from avalanches. Using their extraordinary olfactory ability, they can sniff out bombs and detect dangerous and illicit drugs, as well as a wide range of cancers, even at a very early developing stage. They serve as guide dogs. They detect an oncoming epileptic seizure or a change in a diabetic's blood sugar levels. They herd our sheep, but perhaps most important, they play with us. All that a dog asks in return is food, affection, and a chance to play. That is one fantastic deal. The American Kennel Club has drafted an exhaustive list of benefits that stem from having a dog as part of your family. They reduce our sense of isolation and loneliness. They improve our heart health, in part by causing us to be more physically active. They reduce our stress levels. They augment our oxytocin levels. They help us in the mating market by making us appear more attractive to prospective mates, as well as facilitating our ability to interact with others. Think of the 2005 movie Must Love Dogs, starring Diane Lane and John Cusack. And they force us to play. The urge to play is so strong in dogs that many canine police units use play as the fundamental reward to motivate their dogs to perform well on the job. Not unlike humans, dogs have evolved a strong drive to play, thus explaining why they are our best friends in the animal world. When you return home from a hard day's work and your dog greets you as though you were the Messiah, and immediately begins to solicit you to play, it becomes easy to distress. Your dog lives in the moment, while most of us wallow in the past and worry about the future. Your dog looks at you and communicates the following: here we are, just the two of us. We only have this moment. Forget about your worries. The past is gone. Don't fret about tomorrow. Let's play now. There are a few decisions that you will ever make that will augment your happiness and well-being as much as when you choose to share your life with dogs. Dogs are so special that even the act of spending money on them increases our happiness. Forget about Prozac. Get a dog and immerse yourself in play. Life is fleeting. Every moment is immeasurably precious. One of the ways by which we can honor our wondrous and improbable existence is to adopt a playful mindset as we navigate through the trials and tribulations that life throws at us. Being playful does not imply that you are not a serious person. To the contrary, many of the most austere moments in our lives are deeply enriched by having an open spirit that permits us to tap into our inner child with wide-eyed excitement. To be a maximally happy human is to immerse oneself in perpetual play across countless life domains. Life is too serious not to play.